Hello, today I will be cutting these drums down. They got damaged, so they're really of no use of playing them as acoustic drums. So I'm going to cut them down and use them as electric drum pads, just to add a little style to my electric drums, and to have mesh heads as well, which I'd rather play with mesh heads. I had rubber heads. So we will be going through this and see how this comes together. And first of all, we will have to strip all of this down, and before we cut it down and clean them up, and to get them to where that we will cut them down to the size. These will be cut on a 4-inch cut, and we will get this tore down and get it ripped and go through that, how we rip it. There's a number of ways of doing it. You can do it with just get you a mark and make it straight around it. You can use a hand saw if you wanted to. A hand saw, a saber saw. I'm going to be using a table saw. It's quicker and easier. I got one, why not? So let's get this tore apart and move right along. Just to briefly go over how I cut my shells down, I used this table saw, and I just set the rip fence on 4 inches in between the blade and the rip fence, and this is a piece from the old. And what I did first, as the blade was turning, I barely cut into it, because if you just run it into it and start cutting, it will crack your outer shell if yours has these. And where if you just barely cut it, around, it won't crack your shell so bad. And then after that, I gently just held it up to the rip fence and rolled it in again the blade, and cut it until I went all the way around. And that's how that I cut these shells down to a 4-inch cut. You can also use a saber saw, a hand saw. Just make sure the mark is straight around it. A number of ways you can do it, but the table saw worked for me. It was set in here, so we used it. I'm getting ready to paint these, and I will be going with a flat black and then putting the chrome hardware back on it. And whatever color you choose is fine, but first of all, you want to clean this real good. I'm using acetone, which is used for fingernail polish remover and a variety of other things. And you want to wipe it down good with it, especially if you've had to pull stickers off and got glue. Make sure you got that off, because when the paint hits it, Lord have mercy, what a mess. So first you want to clean it, and then we will sand it. I got a little sanding block here. It's probably about a 120 we'll start out with, and then we'll go back over it with just a scrub pad, and then we will clean it one more time, and then we will be ready for paint. Okay, we've now got it painted. We've got it cleaned up and painted, and I just simply used spray can paint. Use a good quality paint, not just some old cheap paint, because it won't look right. With flat black, it's not as noticeable, or you don't have to be as careful than you do with gloss, but either way, you want it to work out good. So we got this one painted, and we will move right along. We will start putting them together in the hardwire and stuff like that. Hello, we now have our shells cut down, cleaned up, painted, the hardwire on it, and now we are ready to install our triggers, or begin on them. And before we can put our triggers in, you will need approximately 3 L brackets. If yours is 6 lug. If yours is 8 lug, you will need 4 of them. And depending on how many of these you're building. In this case, I'm building the whole kit, so I need 3 to each one. Ben's mine's 6 lug. 3 L brackets and some nuts and bolts, approximately number 8, about 2.5 inches long, and some extra washers and nuts as well, to have enough to do what you need to do to get the triggers to adjust them. So we will put our triggers together, and we will cut us out a piece of plywood and to set our triggers on, and we will continue on. Now we are ready to cut our plates that we will build the triggers off of, that will go inside of the shell. And the best way is to use your shell just to set within the area that you want to cut, and take this as a Sharpie marker, and I will just set this part up again of the shell, and kind of make a mark all the way around. And as you can see, there's a gap in between the shell and the trigger, that the plate that we're building for a trigger, because we will be using plate triggers. And so that will leave you enough room in between the shell and the plate. If you want enough room for it to move up and down that you can adjust. And also, if you are running a rim trigger, you don't want this up real close to it, or you will get double triggered, and it will pick you. Usually your rim will pick the snare. If it's on the snare, will pick the head part up of the drum. So this is how we will do this stage in this build. After we have marked this out, we will take our saw now and saw it out. You can use this bandsaw, some way that you can saw around to get this cut out, and it cut out round and straight as possible. So we will get this cut and move right along. After cutting our plates, you will want to mark in the center where the plate is, or the wood that we cut out is, and you will want to take one of these, a drill and one of these, and set it on the center part, and drill a hole in the center of it to where that you can let the wire of your piezo transducer. Some people will run it across the foam and down that way. I guess that's fine, but I've always put the holes in it. So we will do that. Now we have our plate cut to build our triggers off of. We will now need to install it in. We will need to put our L brackets in and build our triggers at this point. You want to use a piece of 1/4 plywood or a thick piece of paneling to do this project. So let's move right along. Next, we will need to cut our plate that we are going to use with our upgrade on our Alesis Nitro kit. Now you can go with cone triggers and various things, but on a low budget set of drums on the Alesis Nitro kit, upgrading them, I've learned that you need to use a plate. In other words, a plate will fill in the diameter of the shell of the drum, or if you're using the cone in the middle or down over to the side of your shell. The reason that, which one do I prefer the best? If I could, I would use the cones, but on a low budget set of drums, I have learned these plates work the best, because after all, this is a plate out of the Alesis Nitro kit, and if you stick with plates, you are out more to get it to function right. Now if you have a Roland or Yamaha or even a higher grade Alesis kit that you are working with, there's more adjustments on it, and some of your older Alesis has more adjustments on it. But these things are set up to do what they do. They're set up to be what they are as a low budget set of drums. But what am I saying, folks? The adjustments isn't there to do a whole lot with adjusting these plates and getting them to function right in the Alesis Nitro kit. And in fact, some of your kits are pre-adjusted, but you can adjust and save the sensitivity, the threshold, such as that allows you a little adjustment on them, but there's not a lot to work with. So you want to get these plates pretty close to the original. Basically what we are doing is making everything bigger and taking away the rubber pads and using mesh pads instead of rubber. We're using foam in between. So that's a general idea on that. I felt to throw that in there at this point. Building these, if you are trying to upgrade a low budget set of drums or on a low module, the plates do work better. Okay, let's get this cut out and move right along. Now, when we are building these plate triggers, you want everything to be the same. In other words, you want this plate, you want the metal plate, and you will want your foam all to be the same diameter around, and you don't want it touching the shell of the drum. You want just a little bit of space, a fourth or something another, just to clear the shell of the drum, because you don't want to get crossfire. Even if you got a single trigger in these, the closer you get your plate to the outer shell, the more crossfire you're liable to get. In other words, if there's a symbol above this tom, you might get feedback from those if you got it right up against it. And but luckily I can adjust the threshold and the sensitivity there to hopefully to cut that down somewhat. So let's get this cut out and get our triggers together and get this together and see if it works.